anyị na Chineke nna nke pụrụ ihe niile onye ọ bụ naanị ya na-azọpụta onye ọ bụ naanị ya bụ okwu ya niile bụ ihe na amen anyị wee na-asị ezi ebube dị ngọzi na n'ụtụtụ na ịja mma na nsọpụrụ site n'ebighị ebi ma ruo n'ebighị ebi ise ise ise.
Welcome, my amazing viewers. Thank you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you are joining from. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you're notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you so much and remain blessed. If you are joining me from Africa, Asia, Europe, America, Australia, or any part of the world, I thank you very much for your contribution. Please, each time you watch my video, go to the comment section and put down your comments. That is
in many aspects. It even got to a stage, I believe, where a prominent member of the APC actually articulated the sentiment of, oh, come and join us and all your sins will be forgiven. I hope you remember things like that, indicative of the reality that is actually going on. So it didn't surprise me too much. I was alarmed, shocked, alarmed. It didn't surprise me too much when I found that somebody who had been so heavily implicated in the death of a prominent member of that party, Buhari, was in effect one of the founding members, if not the original mind of that party, that his memory should be so trashed by consorting even with one of the prominent figures who featured in events. Forget whether he was innocent of the actual crime or not. That's irrelevant. He was heavily implicated in the humiliation of that individual, that founding member of the party, who was also the Minister of Justice of this nation, and who has such a record, political record, of both activism as a normal human civilian, as well as a politician. And to actually catapult one of those prime suspects and contributors and proven contributors to the elimination, in the sense that his action virtually declared Buhari free game for anyone. And to find that person there and being given a position in that party, in governance, and after the president of the nation, who's supposed to be the head of the party or something, so had actually inaugurated a re-examination of that entire person, among others, other crimes. That is quite a bit of a shock. And as I mentioned at the time, this woman was sacrilege, and also a laceration of the memories of those who were close to him, and those who worked with him, who believed in him. And so, and remember, this Osun is Buhari's state.
Home state.
I think I've contributed even more to Osun State in many aspects than to my own state, because of Bola. Maybe Lagos also comes next on the line because they had projects who they invited me. But even more than my own state, I think I've contributed a lot more to Osun State, possibly than my own state. And so I consider it my state, my second home. When the results began to come in, I just returned, just like a welcome present for me, as I saw that party being punished for that act of sacrilege.
While you were away also, of course, the whole brouhaha over the Muslim ticket of the same party came to light, and that is still generating quite a lot of heated debate, and quite a number of people are surprised that almost 30 years after we last had a Muslim ticket, of course that ended tragically with the June 12 debacle. But do you really think there's much in this debate, knowing you for who you are? Is there really much in this debate, especially if we're talking about religion and religious sentiments?
You know, that's a very difficult question. Difficult only because it sort of turns one into a split personality, if you like. But one really isn't. They're always humanity. A human being is disposed towards, at least those who are rational, who believe in actually reasoning things out. There's nothing strange about one holding simultaneously two conflicting opinions, depending on how you express them and what are the circumstances. Right. In principle, you know me very well. I don't give a damn if the president, vice president, speaker, etc., if they all come from the same village, they have the same religion, they belong to the same tribe, they marry, intermarry, or whatever. If, however, it is transparently, absolutely unarguable that that is a kind of genius, a genius breed which has been donated to the nation and to the world. As long as the capability of every individual who's pulled into governance is proven and is quite clear, and you say there is no alternative. That's my position. It's always been my position. In fact, it's so nice because then the rest of us can just go about the rest of our business quietly, not bother about governance. Now we're talking about a society which is normal, where situations are normal. Is this society normal? In fact, sometimes I've come to the point to say, is Nigeria normal? Is it the norm? Is the average Nigerian to be even the norm? Because if it is, this whole globe would have perished ages ago. The creator, those who believe in it, would have said, I've had enough of this. Even the average Nigerian is not the norm. Certain special circumstances would drive people to take decisions which normally, objectively, one would say is not acceptable. And take a country like Lebanon, which has this arrangement among themselves, in which the president comes from here, another officer comes from here, and that's been working ever since, because they learned from their civil war. And this is the best arrangement we could come up with. I have been instrumental in sending some of our young people to go and study the situation over there in an arrangement with my foundation with the university, Cedar University, Lebanon. Because that's an example, that's one instance. And in this country, even the military seem to recognize the need to express the plurality, not merely of ethnic groups, but of religion, of faith in their own governance. I mean, take, for instance, IBB. He had first Opuye, replaced him with his running mate at the time, quote unquote. Aikomo. Then Aikomo, very good friend of mine when he was there. We used to talk quite a lot. And so a kind of sensibility has been achieved, even under some military dictatorships. Not all, I know. And we've had, almost by unspoken arrangement, a recognition of the peculiarity of this particular society. And so it shouldn't surprise you or me that a number of people find that kind of choice very questionable and unwise, especially at this time. I can understand that perfectly. And at the same time, I recognize the rights of the proposed incumbent to choose whom he wants to run with, to, if he gets ultimately into power. That right is there. However, that right is not also absolute, because we're talking about a very relative society, which Nigeria is right now. And so we're in a very difficult situation. And the question I ask is, why create a controversy? Are there options which would have prevented such a controversy? As they say in certain societies, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if that kind of arrangement has proven not maleficent for society, why tamper with it? Why not be sensitive to the very peculiar circumstances of Nigeria? But me, it's not my problem. But I just think it's unfortunate that the argument has been elevated. We're in the midst of a crisis of faiths, of distrust, ethnic distrust, religious distrust, class distrust, and anything which can be done or any action which can be avoided so that that kind of distrust is not exacerbated. I think politicians should seize the opportunity of not exacerbating the debate. That's all I want to say on this subject. I know what I believe inside of me, but I also know what I recognize as the very peculiar circumstances of Nigerian society at this time. And I want to leave it on that.
Many in your shoes would be pained that in 2022, we still are discussing this and not discussing the initial thing you said, which is that it doesn't matter where this person comes from, what he professes, and so on. But we are. That presupposes perhaps that the politicians have learned nothing, and therefore the people, their followers, have also learned nothing. How difficult is it for someone like you to internalize that, especially because from 1966, you've been in the trenches against this, and still, now, you are in the trenches against this. Only the characters have changed.
Yes.
The points are still there. I shudder to think how people like you look at it. Some of your colleagues or immediate juniors have simply given up and just walked off. But you haven't.
You know something? The first admission I must make is that very often I've said to myself, you have an option, walk off. I found it impossible to blame my colleagues who've given up on this nation. I find absolutely impossible. The question from time to time is, yes, what am I still doing here? I intervene. When I can't meet heads of state physically, I phone them on critical issues. Whether you're saying Obasanjo, you're taking IBB, you're taking Jonathan, I've never phoned Buhari, but I have met him one-on-one, which I took a message to him from one of the embattled. Well, they say, who trusted me? And say, I was the only one that would trust to deliver this message. And I met him. The others, I would pick up the phone and call them and talk. Very often I say, I have a choice. I can walk on. Don't ask me why I have. I think it's just laziness. The idea of uprooting completely and starting all over again. And in any case, what I call the honorable spots of the world shrink by the day.
When the most recent outrage occurred in the Southwest, in the case of Owo, when the Catholic Church, you went to visit the governor of Ondo State. And you said something to him which so many people said needed further elucidation. You said, you know that we know who these are. They're sending us a message. We've got that message.
Well, that's part of the answer, you see, is that my temperament does not accept easily that anyone should chase me out of my God-given earth. So it's a temperamental thing as well. The idea that you can unleash terror on me because you want my little patch of territory, or you want my soul. That is, you want to subjugate me. You want to turn me into a slave. Well, I will sort that out first, and then I'll make up my mind whether I want to leave. So each outrage, unfortunately, has the opposite effect. Whether the outrage is taking place in Benue, whether it's taking place in Kaduna, whether it's taking place in Owo, or whether it's taking place right here along the border. You know, we've been subjected also to this lunacy of this subjugation mentality which some minority people hold. And I find it very difficult to accept, to be chased out of my own entitled portion of the earth. So ultimately,
how much of this would you put down to a lack of understanding of history? That is, in our own part of the world, a lot of people don't read. A lot of those who read for the purpose of passing exams and getting certificates. Once that's done, they're no longer interested. So most of the time, you have the vast part of the population not able to look back, see that this has happened before, seen the result, and therefore, upon seeing something similar about to happen again, are able to say, hey, hold on. We've seen this before, something you referred to as deja vu earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How much, because I've spoken to a couple of people who have said, there's a nexus between our lack of literacy, our lack of understanding of history, and where we are as a country. That because no country grows beyond the education or the literacy of its people.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you use the word history. I hear many people just either do not know history or do not understand the purpose of history. And then there's a different group also who are very selective about history. They know how to distort or misuse history. Take, for instance, when this incursion of the Fulani herdsmen began, and the Mayeti Allah, their spokesman, said in Borno, I think it was in Borno, said, we once ruled this place, and we can take back our land anytime we want. Remember that statement? I've forgotten it. In the midst of the harrowing, the trauma of these people, somebody comes gloating and then citing selective portion of history. That man was a criminal. And I said it at the time. I said, this person should be arrested and locked up. He says he wants to repeat this history of conquest. He's actually doing it. He's admitting either knowledge before, after, or support anyway. And I asked the question, so why are you, isn't there anything like hate speech anymore? Why are you proscribing IPOB without proscribing Maiti Allah? Whose spokesman dares approve the killing, the dispossession of people? Who's choking off our breadbasket, at least one of the directions of the feeding of this nation, chasing farmers of the nation, creating a situation of food scarcity, one of the biggest security threats you can launch against any people, either internally or internally. So that's also a way of knowing history, but disowning history, because you only take a small portion, you disown the rest of it. It doesn't exist. Again, if I may cite Putin, the same way Putin saying to the Ukrainians, you are once part of us. We have a right to continue to dominate you anytime and to take you back anytime we want. What kind of human beings will accept that? Ukrainians are proving themselves one of the most courageous people at the moment. But it's interesting that you should raise the issue of history, because I would like to use every opportunity to ask, who was it that actually terminated the teaching of history in schools? Do you know that many of us didn't know for a long time that history was no longer being taught in schools? It was only a casual statement by Fashola at one time, I remember. I had to phone him. I said, wait a minute. I heard you said something the other day. Are you sure you have your facts right? He said, go and check. The history has been removed from the school curriculum. Now, those who removed them, they weren't fools. When I made inquiries, they said, oh, there were not enough teachers. Absolute balderdash. I mean, it was an insulting kind of excuse. No, they just did not want history to be taught, especially contemporary history. They didn't want people to know and learn from our recent history. Things that led up to the Civil War, the conduct of the military during the Civil War. And they're just cutting their noses to spite their faces, because there were also positive aspects. There were certain lessons learned here and there, you know, from that episode. Even the attitude of governance at the time, even though this was more observed in the breach than in the observance, no vanquished, no conquerors, no victors, at least some, you know, token rhetorical, shall we say, amelioration of situation existed. We can learn from that and improve on that and build on that. And maybe if we're done, we wouldn't have IPOP today. Maybe we would never have had MEND. If we learned from that.
Things that had happened before, Prof. Because in the, when you mentioned IPOP, what again came to my mind was your trip to Biafra ahead of the start of the Civil War in 1967
Yes.
to meet then Lieutenant Colonel Odumego Ojukwu.
Yes, I went across the Biafra. Yeah.
And here we are again. In spite of what you just said about the tokenism and all of that, here we are, 30, 40 years, those who mostly, because again, it was pointed out that most of the most fervent agitators now were those who didn't witness that.
That's right.
And again, it comes back to the question of history, that because they don't know anything about that, and therefore there are no lessons to pick because they don't know.
Yeah, I was very desperate for that war not to happen. First, I thought, I believe till today, it was a wrong war. War is wrong to start with, but this one was particularly bad because the Igbo people, no question at all, were, there was no other word for it, genocide. They underwent the experience of genocide. When the people have undergone that traumatizing, the memory congeals. It congeals, especially towards the immediacy, but it can burst out again any other time. And so when I made statements at the time that you can never defeat Biafra, many people took a very simplistic reading of that. They thought I was referring just to the battlefield. No, I was talking about the idea. The idea has taken hold. And the idea has taken hold of some of those who don't know the full history. Because the Igbo people were not themselves blameless. And when I met Ojukwu, he spoke very, very frankly. And when I met him, when I went and met him in Ivory Coast, we spoke again about the mistakes. I asked him questions like, for instance, why did you shoot Victor Banjo and all the others? He gave what his answers were and so on and so forth. Not very satisfactory. And then since then, I met him again. And when I did this program for BBC Channel 4, it's called Journeys. And I captured the journey to Biafra. I interviewed Gowon, Ojukwu, the Achuzia, and all those who were involved in the wars. I have all the tapes.
Again, look back at history.
Precisely. And these were reminders. And if the lessons of the past, and that means history, consciousness of history, a rational, reasoned consciousness of history, is adopted, is inculcated in schools, you wouldn't have people talking so glibly about the possibility of another war. You'd have people more inclined, as some are, to dialogue. And there are some individuals like that. On the Igbo side, on this side, you've had the session, Hands Across the Niger, Hands Across the Benue, Hands Across Nigeria. These are people who are very history conscious. Ikewanchukwu, Zefe, etc., etc. They're history conscious. And so they don't want the same errors to take place. And we have these movements. One took place in the States, and others have taken place in Lagos. And so you're quite right, the necessity to not just teach history in schools, but to make history part and parcel of civic consciousness all the time, in numerous ways. And I think even the cinema has a role to play in this. Instead of making all those Nollywood films, you can do some really remarkable teaching and yet entertaining films, but that's another story.
No, but it is part of the story, because I was going to point out that this was something at which you excelled. You were a member, you led, you formed several of these groups where some of your plays and some of other plays, some of your books, many of us who, in growing up, possibly couldn't understand the books, went to see some of those plays and got a deeper understanding. There was always the lesson from it. I remember particularly The Lion and the Jewel. Read the story several times, but still couldn't. But then when you went to watch it, when it was pictorially represented, it was a different ballgame. That is all but dead now. Again, as an attribute of history.
No, it's not all dead. There's a very vital young crop of dramatists who are revisiting these things. I remember reading quite a number of scripts. Unfortunately, not very many of them, satisfactorily written. But it's amazing how that event, Lagos at 50, threw up a number of interesting writers, dramatists. Some of them I've had here in my annex, in my program, who are working on their plays. And they're quite history conscious. Unfortunately, there isn't enough artistic support from where we should be having them business. They try, not small, as we say, but not sufficiently.
But that then gives us, let me bring you to something else equally important, which people would say, look, what are we surprised? Two things have happened more recently. Again, going back to the issue of the nexus between literacy and development. The universities have, to quote Professor Adebayo Williams, all but collapsed. They are standing only because of the physical structures. What in most people's minds constitutes universities has left. On the other hand, you have the advent of online media, which has taken away completely the discipline required, and which was why we had libraries, and people had to go physically and go look at books and actually read and reread to understand. Those twin happenings have also had their impact. As we speak, Prof, many of the universities have been closed for 5 months.
Thank you so much for your patience to watch from the beginning to the end. I hope you have learned something from the video you have just watched. The video you have just watched is to bring information to your doorstep and for educational purpose. It is not to demonize anybody. Let us watch continuously and see who can be able to make a sense out of every nonsense we are seeing. We must continue. We move. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter what they say. They will kill us. We'll kill them. At the end of the day, Biafra is here. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please kindly subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so that you're notified each time I upload a video. You will be among the first to receive it. Thank you, and remember this. Bye-bye. See you again.